The words still rang in my ears 3 years later. "Look at her, the poor failure of the family." Victoria had whispered loudly enough for everyone at her wedding reception to hear, champagne glass tilting dangerously in her manicured hand as she nodded in my direction. I'd stood alone near the dessert table, wearing the nicest dress I could afford, a simple blue number I'd found on sale, while around me, guests draped in designer clothes and diamonds pretended not to notice. That night, I'd cried myself to sleep in my small apartment, wondering if my sister was right. Was I really just a failure who couldn't measure up? My name is Rebecca Morgan, and at 38 years old, I was the black sheep in a family that valued status above all else. While my older sister Victoria had married James Phillips, heir to the Phillips real estate empire, I had chosen to become a psychologist working at a community mental health clinic in a struggling neighborhood. Such a waste of potential, my mother Margaret would sigh whenever we gathered for family occasions. All that education just to work with those people. She never specified which "those people" she meant, but the implication was clear. I had chosen the wrong path. The morning after Victoria's cruel comment at her wedding, I woke up with swollen eyes and a strange sense of calm. I looked around my modest one-bedroom apartment, books lining the walls, my ancient laptop humming on the small desk in the corner, a half-finished cup of tea on the nightstand. It wasn't much by my family's standards, but it was mine. And more importantly, every day I went to work knowing I was helping people who truly needed it. That morning, something shifted inside me. Victoria's words had cut deep, but they had also planted a seed of determination. "You know what, Rebecca?" I said to myself in the mirror, adjusting my glasses. "Maybe it's time to channel all that psychological knowledge into something bigger." The idea had been percolating in my mind for months. An accessible mental health application that could provide basic therapeutic tools to people who couldn't afford regular therapy. People like many of my clients, who sometimes had to choose between a therapy session and groceries for the week. As a clinical psychologist with 15 years of experience, I had seen firsthand how simple cognitive techniques could make profound differences in people's lives. What if I could scale that impact? That evening, instead of wallowing in hurt feelings, I opened my laptop and began to sketch out the framework for what would become Mind Ease. I had no experience in app development, but I had something more valuable: intimate knowledge of what people struggling with anxiety, depression, and trauma actually needed. The psychological science behind it was sound. I just needed to find a way to translate it into accessible digital tools. For the next year, I lived a double life. By day, I continued seeing clients at the clinic, listening to their stories, and helping them navigate their pain. By night, I taught myself basic coding, researched artificial intelligence applications in therapy, and slowly built a prototype of my app. I used every penny of my savings to hire a part-time programmer named Kevin, who believed in the vision enough to work for far less than his usual rate. Together, we created something neither of us had seen before: an AI-powered mental health companion that could provide personalized cognitive behavioral therapy exercises, mood tracking, and crisis resources, all packaged in an interface simple enough for anyone to use. "You look exhausted, Rebecca," my father Thomas commented during one of our monthly family dinners. He was the gentler of my parents, though his passivity had always allowed my mother and sister's behavior to go unchecked. "Are you working too hard at that clinic of yours?" Before I could answer, Victoria chimed in, twirling her fork through her pasta. "Of course she's exhausted. Dealing with crazy people all day would drain anyone. I don't know why you insist on that job, Becca. James could easily find you something at one of his companies, something more suitable." "I'm actually working on a side project," I said quietly, surprising myself by sharing even that much. "Oh?" My mother perked up, likely hoping I'd finally come to my senses and chosen a more prestigious career path. "It's just an app for mental health support." I immediately regretted mentioning it, seeing the dismissive look that passed between Victoria and my mother. An app? Victoria laughed. Everyone and their dog is making an app these days. Good luck competing with actual tech companies, Becca. Tate, I changed the subject quickly, asking about my 3-year-old niece, Olivia, Victoria, and James's daughter. As Victoria launched into a detailed account of Olivia's preschool achievements, I felt a strange sense of relief. My family's disinterest meant I could work in peace, without their scrutiny or judgment. And somehow, that felt like freedom. 6 months later, the Mindy's prototype was complete enough to begin beta testing. I recruited volunteers from among my former clients who had completed therapy, as well as colleagues who worked with underserved populations. The feedback was cautiously positive. The interface needed work, and some of the AI responses needed refinement. But the core functionality was sound. People were finding real value in having therapeutic tools available 24/7 in their pockets. "You know what this needs?" Kevin said one night as we reviewed user feedback in my tiny living room. "It needs a breakthrough feature, something no other mental health app has." That night, I couldn't sleep. Kevin was right. Mindy's was good, but not exceptional. Not yet. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about all the clients I'd worked with over the years, trying to identify the gap between traditional therapy and self-help tools that we could bridge. Around 3 in the morning, it hit me. Personalization. Most apps offered the same exercises to everyone, but real therapy was tailored to the individual's specific needs, history, and learning style. For the next 3 months, I poured every waking hour outside the clinic into developing an advanced assessment algorithm that could create truly personalized therapeutic pathways. It was ambitious, possibly too ambitious for our limited resources, but I couldn't let go of the vision. I cashed out my modest retirement fund to hire a data scientist named Maya, who specialized in psychological assessments to help refine the algorithm. "This is actually revolutionary," Maya said, after her first week working on the project. Her eyebrows raised as she reviewed the framework I'd created. Combining cognitive behavioral therapy with adaptive learning and predictive analysis like this? I haven't seen anything like it in the market. Her validation fueled me through countless late nights and early mornings. Mindy's was evolving into something I could be proud of, something that could potentially help thousands, maybe even millions of people. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family's disdain for my career had pushed me to create something that might ultimately prove them wrong about my wasted potential. On a crisp autumn morning, I received an email that changed everything. Michael Chen, founder of Horizon Health Technologies, wanted to meet about Mindy's. I had submitted the app to a health tech innovation competition on a whim, never expecting it to catch the attention of one of the biggest digital health investors in the country. With shaking hands, I called Kevin and Maya to share the news. "Is this for real?" Kevin asked, his voice tight with excitement. "Horizon Health? The Horizon Health?" "Apparently," I replied, still staring at the email. "He wants to meet next week in San Francisco." I had enough in my checking account for a round-trip ticket and 2 nights in the cheapest hotel I could find near the financial district. I told no one in my family about the trip. Their dismissal of my little app project had become something of a running joke at family gatherings, and I couldn't bear to see their pity if nothing came of this meeting. Michael Chen was not what I expected. In his early 40s, he wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt, and greeted me with a warm smile that immediately put me at ease. His corner office overlooked the bay, but it was the wall of books behind his desk that caught my attention. Psychology texts, many of which I recognized from my own education. "Dr. Morgan," he said, gesturing for me to sit across from him. "I've spent the last week using Mindy's, and I have to say, I'm impressed. The personalization engine is unlike anything else on the market." "Thank you," I said, trying to project confidence despite the nervous flutter in my stomach. "It's still in development, but it's brilliant," he interrupted. "The way it adapts to user responses, the integration of multiple therapeutic modalities, the crisis intervention protocols, you've created something special here." And your background as a practicing clinician shows. This wasn't developed in a vacuum by tech people who've never sat with a client in distress. For the next 2 hours, we discussed Mindease in detail, its current capabilities, the vision for its future, and the challenges of scaling it to reach more users. By the time our meeting ended, Michael had offered to invest in Mindease, with the potential for Horizon Health to acquire it outright if development milestones were met. As I flew back home, contract in hand, I felt a strange mix of validation and trepidation. The initial investment would allow me to work on Mindease full-time, to hire a proper development team, to realize the full potential of what I'd created. But it also meant leaving the security of my clinic position, taking a risk that my family would surely see as further evidence of my poor judgment. "You're quitting your job for an app that doesn't even exist yet?" my mother exclaimed when I finally shared my decision at Sunday dinner. "Rebecca, have you lost your mind?" Victoria exchanged glances with James, who was unusually quiet. "Becca, are you sure about this? App development is an oversaturated market. The failure rate is astronomical." "I'm sure," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I've secured investment from Horizon Health Technologies. They believe in Mindease." "Never heard of them," my mother sniffed, though I noticed James shifting uncomfortably in his seat. As I left that night, James followed me to my car. "Horizon Health is a major player," he said quietly. "If they're backing you, they must see something valuable. Good luck, Rebecca." It was the first genuine encouragement I'd received from anyone in my family, and it came from the person I least expected. I thanked him and drove home, wondering if perhaps I had misjudged my brother-in-law all these years. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of development, testing, and refinement. With proper funding, Mindease transformed from a promising prototype into a polished product ready for market. Our small team expanded, and I found myself in the unexpected role of CEO of a startup. The learning curve was steep, but Michael proved to be a mentor as well as an investor, guiding me through the business aspects while respecting my vision for the psychological integrity of the app. When Mindease launched in the App Store, I held my breath. We had good pre-release reviews and a small but enthusiastic group of beta testers singing our praises. But the real test would be the wider market. Would people pay for a premium mental health app when so many free options existed? The answer came faster than any of us anticipated. Within a month, Mindease had over 50,000 downloads. Within 3 months, that number had multiplied tenfold. The personalization engine that had been my midnight inspiration was resonating with users in a way none of us had fully anticipated. People weren't just downloading the app, they were using it consistently, subscribing to the premium features, and telling others about their experiences. The day Horizon Health Technologies offered to acquire Mindease outright for $50 million, I was sitting in my new office in downtown San Francisco. The space was modest compared to most tech startups. I had insisted on keeping overhead low and investing primarily in development and user support, but it was still a far cry from my tiny apartment back home. When Michael called with the offer, I nearly dropped my phone. "50 million?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you serious?" "Deadly serious," Michael replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. The board was unanimous. "Your user retention rates are unprecedented in the mental health app space, and the clinical outcomes data is compelling. Not to mention 3 major healthcare systems are already in talks to offer Mindease as part of their patient care packages." I looked out the window at the city skyline, trying to process what this meant. "I need to think about it," I said finally. "Of course," Michael answered. "This is a life-changing decision. But Rebecca, you should know, the offer includes keeping you on as Chief Clinical Officer. We don't just want the app, we want the vision behind it. Your vision." That night, I couldn't sleep. $50 million. The number seemed abstract, almost fictional. I'd never been motivated by money, My career choices made that obvious, but I couldn't deny the security and freedom such a sum would provide. More importantly, becoming part of Horizon Health would give MindEase the resources to reach millions more people who needed mental health support. By morning, my decision was made. 2 weeks later, I signed the acquisition agreement, and the following day, $50 million was transferred into my bank account. I stared at the number on my computer screen for nearly an hour, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't about the money itself, it was what it represented. After 15 years as a psychologist, after being dismissed as the family failure for choosing a helping profession over prestige and wealth, I had created something valuable enough that one of the biggest health tech companies in the world wanted it. I called no one from my family to share the news. Instead, I took myself out to dinner at a small Italian restaurant near my apartment, ordered a glass of champagne, and quietly celebrated alone. The next day, I returned to work as the newly appointed Chief Clinical Officer of MindEase, now a division of Horizon Health Technologies. Outwardly, little had changed. I still worked the same hours, still focused on making the app the best it could be. But inwardly, I felt a profound shift. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly validated in my choices. 3 weeks after the acquisition, I did something completely out of character. I walked into a Ferrari dealership in San Francisco wearing jeans and a casual sweater, and purchased a sleek red Ferrari Roma without haggling over the price. The salesperson was skeptical at first, clearly wondering if I could actually afford such a car, but his attitude changed rapidly once the payment cleared. "Will this be your everyday vehicle, Dr. Morgan?" he asked as he handed me the keys. I laughed. "No, definitely not. It's more of a personal milestone." I ran my hand over the smooth leather steering wheel. A reminder that success comes in many forms. I wasn't a car person. My previous vehicle had been a 10-year-old Honda that I'd driven until the maintenance costs outweighed its value, but something about the Ferrari spoke to me, not as a status symbol to show off to others, but as a private acknowledgement of how far I'd come. I arranged to have it shipped back to my hometown, where it would wait in a private garage until I returned. And return I would. Victoria and James's 10th wedding anniversary was approaching, and my mother had been planning a lavish family dinner to celebrate for months. I had initially declined the invitation, citing work commitments, but after the acquisition, I changed my mind. Perhaps it was petty, but after years of enduring their condescension, I wanted to attend that dinner as the person I had become, successful on my own terms. I flew home the day before the anniversary dinner. Instead of staying with my parents as expected, I checked into the nicest hotel in town, a small act of independence that felt surprisingly significant. The Ferrari had arrived as scheduled and waited in the hotel's private parking garage. I ran my fingers over its glossy surface, feeling a strange mixture of pride and apprehension about the following evening. When I called my parents to confirm I would attend the dinner after all, my mother seemed suspicious. "What changed your mind?" she asked. "I thought you were too busy with your little app to make time for family." I bit back a sharp response. "The project is in a good place right now. I can take a day off." "Well, we'll be happy to have you," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Victoria and James have some exciting news to share. Try to dress appropriately, Rebecca. It's a special occasion." Her last comment decided it for me. I had planned to reveal my changed circumstances subtly, perhaps mentioning the acquisition if the conversation naturally led that way. But my mother's casual dismissiveness triggered a lifetime of accumulated hurt. For tomorrow's dinner, I would create a deliberate contrast, arriving in the most casual outfit possible, while driving a car that cost more than some houses. The next evening, I dressed in well-worn jeans, a simple t-shirt, and the pièce de résistance, rubber flip-flops. I pulled my hair into a messy ponytail and wore minimal makeup. Looking in the mirror, I recognized the childishness of what I was doing, but couldn't bring myself to change. After years of being judged for not meeting their standards, I wanted to set my own. I drove the Ferrari slowly through my parents' upscale neighborhood, feeling strangely nervous. The car purred beneath me, responsive to the slightest touch. As I turned into their circular driveway, I saw several luxury vehicles already parked. James's Bentley, my father's Mercedes, and a couple of cars I didn't recognize that likely belonged to the few close friends invited to the intimate celebration. Taking a deep breath, I parked the Ferrari directly in front of the house, impossible to miss, and stepped out in my deliberately casual attire. I grabbed the gift I'd brought, a beautifully wrapped vintage bottle of champagne that had cost more than my monthly rent in my old apartment, and walked to the front door. My mother answered, her smile freezing as she took in my appearance. "Rebecca," she said tightly, "you're late, and what on earth are you wearing? This is a formal dinner." "Sorry, Mom," I replied, kissing her cheek as I entered. "I came straight from the airport. No time to change." She looked past me to the driveway, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of the Ferrari, but she made no comment. Instead, she ushered me quickly into the dining room where everyone was already seated. Victoria's face when she saw me was worth every second of discomfort. Her perfect features arranged themselves into an expression of horrified disdain. "Rebecca," she said, her voice carrying across the room, "did you lose your luggage? Or are flip-flops the new fashion statement in San Francisco?" The table fell silent. James looked uncomfortable, while my father simply sighed and took a large sip of his wine. The other guests, two couples who were close friends of Victoria and James, exchanged glances, clearly aware they were witnessing some form of family drama. "They're comfortable," I said with a shrug, taking the empty seat across from Victoria. "How are you? You look well." Victoria ignored my question, her eyes fixed on my feet. "Are you struggling financially, Rebecca? Is that why you can't afford proper shoes? You know you can always ask for help." The concern in her voice was so patently false that I almost laughed. This was the Victoria I remembered, always finding ways to assert her superiority, especially in front of an audience. Before I could respond, my mother jumped in. "Victoria and James have wonderful news," she announced, clearly trying to move past my inappropriate attire. "Tell her, dear." Victoria's face transformed, glowing with self-satisfaction. "James has been named CEO of Phillips Enterprises," she said proudly. "The board made it official last week. We're moving into the Westwood estate next month. You know, the one with the private tennis courts and the lake view." "That's wonderful news," I said sincerely, turning to James. "Congratulations." James nodded, but seemed oddly subdued for someone who had just received such a significant promotion. "Thank you, Rebecca." "And that's not all," Victoria continued, unable to contain herself. "We're also expecting a little brother or sister for Olivia." The table erupted in congratulations and well wishes. I joined in, genuinely happy for them despite everything. I had always liked my niece Olivia, though I rarely got to see her due to the tension between Victoria and me. Another child in the family was good news. As the excitement settled, my mother directed the conversation back to me with clear reluctance. "Rebecca has been working on some sort of app in California," she told the guests dismissively. "Something to do with her psychology background." "Mind ease," I supplied. "It's a mental health application." "How useful," said one of Victoria's friends, her tone making it clear she found it anything but. "Is there much money in apps these days?" asked another guest, a man about James's age who wore a watch that probably cost as much as my old car. Victoria seized the opening. "That's what I've been wondering. Honestly, Rebecca, I'm worried about you. Living so far away, working all hours on this app project, and now showing up like," she gestured at my outfit, "this. Are you having money troubles? Because those flip-flops look like they came from a dollar store." The table went quiet again, everyone looking between Victoria and me. I took a sip of water, considering my response. Part of me wanted to blurt out the truth about the acquisition, to see the shock on their faces. But another part, the psychologist in me, perhaps, recognized that this moment was about more than money or success. It was about breaking a lifelong pattern. Actually, I said calmly, high heels would make it difficult to drive my new car. What new car? My mother asked, frowning. The Ferrari in your driveway, I replied. James choked on his wine. That's your Ferrari? The Roma? I nodded, watching as Victoria's expression shifted from smugness to confusion. Don't be ridiculous, she said with a forced laugh. You can't afford a Ferrari on a psychologist's salary, especially not one who works at a community clinic. I don't work at the clinic anymore, I explained. I've been running MindEase full-time for the past year. My father spoke up for the first time. The app is doing well then? Very well, I said simply. Horizon Health Technologies acquired it last month. James put down his wine glass slowly. Horizon Health? Michael Chen's company? Yes, I confirmed. Michael was our first investor, actually. Wait, Victoria interrupted, her voice sharp. Are you saying your little app actually made money? How much? I met her gaze steadily. The acquisition was for $50 million. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's mouth opened and closed without sound. Victoria stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. The other guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. $50 million? My father finally repeated, his voice uncharacteristically loud. My God, Rebecca. Victoria recovered quickly, her shock transforming into something harder to read. Well, she said with a tight smile, it seems we're both celebrating good news tonight. Indeed, I agreed, raising my glass. To new beginnings. The dinner proceeded in a strange atmosphere after that revelation. My mother kept looking at me as if seeing me for the first time, while Victoria alternated between forced cheerfulness and barely concealed agitation. James seemed thoughtful, occasionally asking intelligent questions about MindEase and the mental health technology landscape. It was the longest conversation we'd ever had. As dessert was served, an elaborate cake commemorating Victoria and James's decade of marriage, I found myself feeling oddly hollow. The validation I had expected to feel from revealing my success wasn't materializing. Instead, I was struck by the realization that nothing fundamental had changed. My family's values remained the same, only their perception of me had shifted. And that shift was based solely on the amount in my bank account, not on who I was or what I had created. So, my mother said as coffee was poured, will you be looking for a house in our neighborhood now that you can afford it? There's a lovely property just 3 doors down that's coming on the market soon. Before I could answer, Victoria jumped in. And you must let me introduce you to my stylist, Rebecca. Now that you're a successful businesswoman, you'll need a wardrobe to match. No more of this. She gestured at my casual clothes. I looked between them, suddenly tired. Actually, I'll be staying in San Francisco. My role at Horizon Health keeps me there. But surely you could work remotely, my mother pressed. Families should be together, especially now that you've finally found success. The implication was clear. Now that I was wealthy, I was worthy of being included. The Ferrari had changed their perception of me more thoroughly than 15 years of dedicated work as a psychologist ever had. As I drove back to my hotel that night, the Ferrari's headlights cutting through the darkness, I felt a strange mix of emotions. The vindication I had sought had arrived, but it tasted different than I'd imagined. Perhaps the real victory wasn't in proving my worth to my family, but in the realization that I no longer needed their validation to feel accomplished. The next morning, I woke to a series of text messages from Victoria, suggesting lunch before I returned to California. I agreed, curious about what she wanted to discuss without our parents present. We arranged to meet at an upscale restaurant downtown. Her choice. I arrived in the Ferrari, but this time dressed in a simple but elegant dress. Victoria was already seated, looking immaculate as always in designer clothes, her hair and makeup perfect. But something about her seemed different, a tension around her eyes that I hadn't noticed at dinner. I wanted to apologize, she said, once we'd ordered, surprising me, for what I said at my wedding, about you being the family failure. It was cruel, and I knew it would hurt you. I studied her face, trying to determine her sincerity. Why did you say it? Victoria looked down at her water glass. Because I was jealous, she admitted quietly. You've always been so certain about who you are, what you want. Even when everyone told you that becoming a psychologist was a mistake, you did it anyway. I've never had that kind of courage. Of all the responses I had anticipated, this wasn't one of them. Jealous? Of me? Victoria, you've had everything. I've had what our parents wanted me to have, she corrected. The right husband, the right house, the right life. But none of it was my choice. Not really. For the first time in our adult lives, I felt like I was seeing the real Victoria. Not the perfect, polished persona she presented to the world, but the woman beneath. It was a startling reminder that as a psychologist, I should have known better than to accept surface appearances. Even with my own sister. What would you have chosen? I asked, genuinely curious. In all our years growing up together, Victoria had never expressed any ambition beyond marrying well and maintaining the social status our parents valued so highly. She twirled her wedding ring thoughtfully. I wanted to study art history, she said finally. I had this dream of working in a museum, maybe even curating my own exhibitions someday. But Dad said it was a worthless degree. And Mom, she sighed. Well, you know Mom. She had my life planned out since we were children. I nodded, remembering how differently our parents had treated us. Victoria, the beautiful firstborn, groomed for social success. Me, the bookish younger daughter, given more freedom precisely because they had lower expectations. You could still study art history, I suggested. It's not too late. Victoria gave a small, sad laugh. At 41, with a husband, a daughter, and another baby on the way, not to mention all our social obligations, James expects a certain type of wife, Rebecca. Someone who organizes charity galas and sits on boards, not someone who goes back to school. There was something in her voice, a resignation that seemed at odds with the Victoria I thought I knew. I wondered how much of her confident, sometimes cutting personality was a mask she wore to hide her disappointments. Is that why you've always been so hard on me? I asked softly. Because I chose my own path? She didn't answer immediately, taking a sip of her water instead. Maybe, she admitted finally. It's easier to believe someone is making a mistake than to admit you're envious of their choices. She looked up at me, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. And now you're worth $50 million, which makes it all so ironically perfect, doesn't it? The money doesn't change who I am, I said, or what I value. No, she agreed. That's what makes it worse, in a way. You succeeded without compromising. I compromised everything and got this. See, she gestured vaguely at herself. The designer clothes, the perfect hair, the diamond jewelry. For a moment, I glimpsed what it might be like to be Victoria, trapped in a life of appearances, always performing the role of the perfect wife and mother, never pursuing her own interests or desires. Despite our comfortable upbringing, I realized I had been the fortunate one, allowed to follow my passion because it wasn't expected to lead anywhere impressive. It's not too late to change things, I said again, to find space in your life for what you really want. Victoria shook her head. You don't understand. James and I, it's complicated, especially now with the promotion and the new baby. She straightened her shoulders, and I watched as the familiar mask slipped back into place. Anyway, I didn't ask you to lunch to complain about my perfect life. I wanted to know more about your app. $50 million, Becca. I still can't believe it. I recognized the deflection, but decided not to push. This glimpse of Victoria's true feelings was more than she had shared with me in years. Instead, I told her about Mind Ease, how it had started as a simple idea to help people who couldn't access traditional therapy, how it had evolved with user feedback, and how the personalization engine had been the breakthrough that caught Horizon Health's attention. "You built something that helps people," Victoria said when I finished. There was genuine admiration in her voice. "Something that matters. No wonder they paid so much for it." "The money was never the goal," I admitted. "I just wanted to make good psychological care more accessible." "And now you're Chief Clinical Officer at Horizon Health," she said. "That's impressive, Becca. Really." "Thank you," I said, surprised by how much her approval meant to me, even now. "What about you? You mentioned a new house? And congratulations again on the baby." Victoria's expression brightened as she described the Westwood estate, its spacious rooms, manicured gardens, and the private lake where James planned to teach Olivia to sail. As she spoke, I noticed that she mentioned the property's prestige more than any personal connection to it. It was the most expensive house in the most exclusive neighborhood, perfect for entertaining James's business associates. "And the baby is due in November," she added. "James is hoping for a boy this time, to carry on the Phillips name." "And what are you hoping for?" I asked. She blinked, as if the question had never occurred to her. I hadn't really thought about it. "A healthy baby, I suppose." Our food arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. As we ate, Victoria steered the discussion to safer topics. Mutual acquaintances from our hometown, her plans for redecorating the new house, Olivia's progress in her exclusive preschool. The glimpse of her true feelings faded, replaced by the Victoria I was more familiar with, polished, proper, focused on appearances. By the time we finished lunch, I wasn't sure what to think. Had Victoria's moment of vulnerability been genuine? Or was it another performance, this time designed to establish a connection with her newly wealthy sister? The psychologist in me wanted to believe the former, but years of experience with Victoria made me cautious. As we waited for the check, Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "I need to take this. It's James's assistant." She stood and walked a few steps away from the table, her back to me as she answered. I couldn't hear her words, but I could see the tension radiating through her body as she listened. Her free hand gripped the back of an empty chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. When she turned back to me, her face was drained of color. "I have to go," she said, her voice strangely flat. "There's a situation at James's office." "Victoria? What's wrong?" I stood, concerned by her sudden pallor. "Nothing. Everything's fine." She gathered her purse with trembling hands. "I just need to meet James right away." "Let me drive you," I offered. "You don't look well." "No!" The word came out sharper than I think she intended. She took a breath, visibly composing herself. "No, thank you. I have my car. I'll call you later, okay?" Before I could respond, she was walking rapidly toward the exit, leaving me standing alone at our table. I settled the bill quickly and followed, but by the time I reached the parking lot, Victoria's car was already pulling away. I drove back to my hotel troubled by the abrupt end to our lunch and Victoria's obvious distress. Something was seriously wrong. I had never seen my composed, controlled sister so shaken. I tried calling her, but the call went straight to voicemail. I left a message asking her to let me know she was okay, then tried James's number with the same result. That evening, I found out what had happened, not from Victoria or anyone in my family, but from the local news. James Phillips had been arrested on charges of securities fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Federal agents had raided the Phillips Enterprises offices that afternoon, seizing computers and documents. The report included footage of James being escorted from the building in handcuffs, his face ashen. I sat on the edge of my hotel bed, staring at the television in shock. The news anchor was describing the allegations that James had been running a sophisticated scheme to defraud investors and hide millions in offshore accounts for years. The Phillips family fortune, it seemed, was built on a foundation of lies. My first thought was for Victoria. Whatever our complicated history, she was my sister, and she was undoubtedly in crisis. I tried calling her again, then my parents, but no one answered. Finally, I got in the Ferrari and drove to my parents' house, hoping to find them there. The street outside their home was lined with news vans, reporters standing in the gathering dusk with microphones and cameras at the ready. I parked a block away and approached on foot, but there was no way to reach the front door without being seen. A reporter recognized me as I drew closer. "Are you a family member?" she asked, thrusting a microphone toward me. "Do you have any comment on James Phillips's arrest?" "No comment," I said firmly, pushing past her. Other reporters swarmed around me, shouting questions about James, about Victoria, about what the family knew of his alleged crimes. I kept my head down and finally reached the front door, ringing the bell repeatedly until my father answered. He looked older than he had at dinner the previous night, his face drawn with worry. "Rebecca," he said, ushering me inside quickly and shutting the door against the clamor of questions. "Thank God. We've been trying to reach you." "My phone's been on all day," I said, confused. "I've been calling all of you." "Your mother blocked your number," he admitted wearily. "After lunch with Victoria, she said you were being insensitive about the new baby, making everything about your app success. You know how she gets." I stared at him incredulously. "That's not what happened at all. Where's Victoria? Is she okay?" My father led me into the living room, where my mother sat rigid on the sofa, a half-empty glass of something amber in her hand. Victoria was curled in an armchair by the window, staring out at nothing in particular. She didn't turn when I entered. "What's happening?" I asked, looking between them. "I saw the news. Is it true? About James?" "Of course it's not true," my mother snapped. "It's a witch hunt. James is a brilliant businessman. They're jealous of his success, that's all." I glanced at my father, who avoided my eyes, then at Victoria, who remained motionless by the window. "What did his lawyers say?" I asked quietly. "They're working on bail," my father replied, "but the charges are extensive." "He's innocent," my mother insisted. "This will all be cleared up. The Phillips name means something in this town." I moved to the armchair where Victoria sat and knelt beside it. "Vicky," I said softly, using her childhood nickname. "Talk to me. Are you okay?" She turned slowly, and I was struck by how vacant her eyes looked. "Did you know," she said in a strange, distant voice, "that there's no such thing as the Westwood estate? James made it up. The promotion, too. It was all lies." My heart sank. "I'm so sorry." "Apparently," she continued in the same detached tone, "the company has been failing for years. James has been creating fake accounts, fake profits, fake everything. He told me we were worth $60 million. A bitter laugh escaped her. "And now we're worth nothing. Less than nothing. They've frozen all our accounts. They took my credit cards. I couldn't even buy Olivia a snack on the way here because I didn't have any cash." "Victoria, stop it," my mother hissed. "The neighbors will hear you." "Let them hear," Victoria suddenly shouted, springing to her feet. "Let everyone hear. My husband is a criminal. Our entire life has been a lie. Everything we own was bought with stolen money." "Lower your voice," my mother demanded, looking nervously toward the front of the house where reporters still lingered. "This isn't helping anything." "Nothing will help," Victoria cried. "Don't you understand? It's over. The house, the cars, the private school for Olivia, all gone, and James will go to prison. What am I supposed to do? I'm 41 years old with no job, no money, and a 4-year-old daughter, and I'm pregnant." Her voice broke on the last word, and she crumpled back into the chair, burying her face in her hands. I looked at my parents, expecting them to comfort her, but they seemed paralyzed. My father staring at the floor, my mother taking another long drink from her glass. With a surge of anger at their inaction, I moved to Victoria's side and put my arm around her shaking shoulders. "It's going to be okay," I told her quietly. "You're not alone. I'm here." "What would you know about it?" she sobbed. "Your life is perfect now. $50 million, and a Ferrari, and a job you love. You won. I lost. Isn't that what you wanted?" "No," I said firmly. "That's never what I wanted." I looked up at my parents. Victoria and Olivia can stay with me in San Francisco until this is sorted out, away from the media circus here. Don't be ridiculous, my mother said. They'll stay here, where they belong, in their community. What community? Victoria asked bitterly. The same people who have been calling all day to cancel dinner plans and withdraw party invitations? The friends who won't even answer my texts now? That community? My mother had no answer for that. My father finally looked up, meeting my eyes with a silent plea. For all his passivity, I knew he loved both his daughters. He just didn't know how to help. You'll come to San Francisco, I repeated, more gently this time. Both of you. I have plenty of room. Olivia can go to school there. You can have space to figure out what you want to do next, away from all of this. Victoria lifted her tear-stained face. Why would you help me? After how I've treated you all these years. The question hung in the air between us, carrying the weight of a lifetime of complicated feelings. Why would I help her? The sister who had mocked and belittled me, who had made me feel like a failure for choosing a career of service over wealth and status. The answer came to me with surprising clarity. Because you're my sister, I said simply. And because now you need exactly what I've spent my life learning how to provide. Help for people in crisis. Fresh tears filled Victoria's eyes, but these seemed different from the desperate sobs of before. I don't deserve your help, she whispered. It's not about deserving, I told her. It's about needing. And right now, you need someone in your corner who isn't going to judge you for what James did. Someone who can help you rebuild. My mother stood abruptly. This is absurd. Victoria belongs here, with family. I am family, I reminded her. And I'm offering a fresh start, away from the gossip and the reporters and the constant reminders. Victoria looked between my mother and me, her internal struggle visible on her face. Then she straightened her shoulders in a gesture so familiar, it made my heart ache. I want to go with Rebecca, she said quietly, but firmly, for Olivia's sake, and the baby's. My mother opened her mouth to argue, but my father finally intervened. It's a good idea, Margaret, he said, just until things settle down. Victoria needs peace right now, not constant scrutiny. The look my mother gave him could have frozen fire, but she didn't contradict him. Instead, she turned and left the room without another word, the ice in her glass clinking as she went. That night, I helped Victoria pack essentials for herself and Olivia, who was staying with Victoria's former best friend, the only one who hadn't abandoned her at the first sign of trouble. We arranged for Victoria's car to be shipped to San Francisco, and I booked them both on my flight back the following day. Throughout it all, Victoria moved with a shell-shocked automation, as if she couldn't quite believe the sudden implosion of her carefully constructed life. As I was leaving to return to my hotel, Victoria stopped me at the door. "Becca," she said hesitantly, "I need to ask you something." "Anything," I promised. "Why the Ferrari?" she asked. "It doesn't seem like you, even with $50 million. I considered the question carefully. "I think I bought it to prove something," I admitted, "to show that I could have the trappings of success, if I wanted them. But the truth is, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is that Mindease is helping people who need it." Victoria nodded slowly. "I envied the wrong things about you," she said. "All these years, I thought you were the failure, because you didn't have money or status, but you had purpose, and now I have nothing." I took her hand. "That's not true. You have Olivia, you have the baby, and you have me. We'll figure out the rest together." As I drove back to my hotel, I reflected on the strange turns life could take. Just 3 days ago, I had arrived in town with childish plans to flaunt my new wealth, to prove my worth to a family that had always made me feel inadequate. Now I was returning to San Francisco, with my sister and niece in tow, facing a future very different from anything I had imagined. The Ferrari, which had seemed so important as a symbol of my success, now felt like an empty gesture. What mattered wasn't the car or the money, but the fact that I had built something meaningful, an app that helped people access mental health support and now, perhaps, a genuine relationship with my sister for the first time in our adult lives. The first weeks of Victoria and Olivia living with me in San Francisco were a delicate adjustment for all of us. My spacious but simply furnished apartment, which had always felt more than adequate for one person, suddenly seemed crowded with the addition of a distraught pregnant woman and an energetic 4-year-old. I quickly realized we would need more room and began looking for a house to rent, something with a yard for Olivia and separate spaces where Victoria and I could each have privacy. Meanwhile, the Phillips scandal continued to unfold in increasingly dramatic fashion. New allegations emerged daily. James had apparently been falsifying company records for nearly a decade, creating elaborate fiction to hide massive losses and divert investor funds to support his family's lavish lifestyle. The $60 million Victoria thought they were worth had never existed. Worse, they were now millions in debt, with lawsuits piling up from defrauded investors. James remained in jail, unable to make the astronomical bail set by the judge, who considered him a significant flight risk. His legal team, once comprised of the most prestigious attorneys in the state, had dwindled to a single public defender, as it became clear he had no money to pay them. Victoria spoke to him once by phone, a brief, painful conversation that left her crying for hours afterward. He admitted it, he told me that night, sitting on my balcony with a cup of tea going cold between her hands. All of it. He said he did it for me, to give me the life I deserved. "That's not fair to you," I said gently. "His choices were his own." "But I never questioned any of it," she whispered. "The houses, the cars, the jewelry. I just accepted it all." "What does that make me?" "A wife who trusted her husband," I answered. "Victoria, you're not responsible for James's crimes." She didn't seem convinced, but she nodded anyway, her hand moving unconsciously to rest on her growing belly. At 20 weeks pregnant, she had recently learned she was carrying a boy, the son James had wanted to carry on the Phillips name, a name now synonymous with one of the largest financial frauds in the state's history. While Victoria struggled with the emotional fallout of James's actions, I focused on practical matters. I found us a comfortable 4-bedroom house with a fenced yard in a family-friendly neighborhood, enrolled Olivia in a good preschool, and helped Victoria begin the overwhelming process of disentangling her finances from James's. The federal investigation had determined that Victoria had no knowledge of or involvement in the fraud, which meant she wasn't facing criminal charges. But it also meant she had to prove which assets, if any, weren't purchased with ill-gotten funds. "There's nothing," she told me after meeting with a financial advisor I had hired. "Everything we owned came from Phillips Enterprises, and everything from Phillips Enterprises was tainted. The cars, the jewelry, even Olivia's college fund. It's all being seized or frozen." "What about before you were married?" I asked. "Did you have savings, investments?" Victoria gave a hollow laugh. "I was 29 when we met, working as an assistant at an art gallery. My one small rebellion against Mom and Dad. I made $18,000 a year. There were no savings." I didn't tell her that I had already set up a trust for Olivia and her unborn brother, funded with $5 million from my Mind-Ease proceeds. That conversation could wait until Victoria had regained some emotional stability. For now, I simply assured her that she didn't need to worry about money, that I had more than enough to support all of us. "I can't just live off you forever," she protested. "I need to find work. But who's going to hire me? I have no real job experience, and now my last name is toxic." "You don't have to figure everything out right away," I reminded her. "You're pregnant, dealing with an impossible situation. Give yourself time." But Victoria had spent her entire adult life defining herself through her marriage and social status. Without those anchors, she seemed adrift, alternating between periods of frantic activity, researching divorce lawyers, looking into degree programs, reorganizing the entire kitchen, and days when she barely got out of bed, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the changes in her life. I suggested therapy, offering to connect her with excellent colleagues, but Victoria resisted. "I'm not crazy," she snapped when I brought it up for the third time. "Therapy isn't for crazy people," I said patiently. "It's for anyone going through difficult life transitions, which you certainly are. And have the therapist judge me? Think I must have known what James was doing? No, thank you." He turned away, effectively ending the conversation. Instead of pushing, I tried a different approach. I installed Mindease on her phone, showing her how to use the basic functions: the guided meditations, the mood tracking, the journaling prompts. "Just try it," I suggested. "No human is watching or judging. It's completely private." To my surprise, she began using it regularly. Sometimes I would find her sitting in the window seat of our new house, earbuds in, eyes closed as she followed a meditation. Other times, I'd see her typing intently into the journaling section, her face concentrated in a way I rarely saw otherwise. She never discussed what she was writing, and I never asked, respecting the privacy that was so essential to the app's effectiveness. 4 months after Victoria and Olivia moved in with me, James accepted a plea deal, 15 years in federal prison, in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations into others involved in the fraud. The news hit Victoria hard. Though their marriage had effectively ended the day of his arrest, the finality of the sentence made it real in a new way. 15 years, she said numbly when she hung up from the call with James's lawyer. Olivia will be 19 when he gets out. The baby won't even know him. I sat beside her on the sofa, unsure what to say. No words could make this situation better. Instead, I simply held her hand as she processed the news. "I'm filing for divorce," she said, after a long silence. "I've been putting it off, telling myself to wait until after the baby comes, but I can't anymore. I need to start over completely." "I think that's a good decision," I said carefully, "and I'll support you through it, whatever you need." Victoria squeezed my hand. "You've already done so much, Becca. Too much." "That's what family does," I reminded her. "And we are family, not just sisters, but friends now too, I hope." She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "Friends," she agreed quietly. Who would have thought? 2 weeks later, Victoria gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Daniel Thomas Morgan, deliberately choosing our family name rather than Phillips, and our father's first name for his middle name. He was perfect, tiny fingers and toes, a dusting of dark hair, eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond his minutes on earth. As I held my nephew for the first time, watching Victoria's exhausted but peaceful face, I felt a surge of protectiveness toward both of them. Daniel would grow up without the burden of his father's crimes or the shallow values that had shaped Victoria's and my childhood. He would know from the beginning that worth came from character and contribution, not from wealth or status. Victoria recovered quickly from the birth, and with Daniel's arrival, she seemed to find a new purpose. She was a natural mother, patient and loving with both Olivia and the baby. The brittle, status-conscious woman I had grown up with was fading, replaced by someone more authentic and grounded. 6 weeks after Daniel's birth, Victoria surprised me by leaving a brochure on the kitchen counter one morning. It was for the local community college, open to the page about their art history program. "I'm thinking of enrolling for the spring semester," she said casually as she prepared Olivia's lunch. "Just 1 or 2 classes to start, while Daniel is still so young. What do you think?" I picked up the brochure, noting the courses she had circled. "Introduction to Art History and Renaissance Painting." "I think it's a wonderful idea," I said sincerely. "We can work out a schedule with Olivia's preschool and Daniel's feeding times, maybe get a part-time nanny to help when you have classes." "Are you sure?" she asked, her old insecurity briefly visible. "It seems selfish to focus on school when you're already doing so much for us." "It's not selfish to pursue education," I told her firmly. "Besides, I think it will be good for Olivia and Daniel to see their mother following her passion. That's a powerful example to set." Victoria smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, something I was seeing more frequently these days. "Thank you. she said simply. That evening, after the children were asleep, Victoria joined me on the back patio, where I was enjoying a rare glass of wine and the mild San Francisco night. She had her tablet with her and seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "I want to show you something," she said, sitting beside me. "I've been working on it for a few weeks now, using some of the journaling prompts from MindEase." She handed me the tablet, open to a document titled "Finding Myself After Falling." I looked at her questioningly. "It's a memoir," she explained, "about everything that happened with James, but also about growing up with our parents' values, and how I lost myself trying to be what everyone expected, and now finding my way back." I scrolled through the document, reading passages here and there. Victoria's writing was surprisingly good, clear and insightful, with moments of raw honesty that must have been difficult to articulate. She wrote about the humiliation of James's arrest, the shock of discovering their entire life had been built on lies, and the painful process of facing her own complicity in valuing wealth and status above authenticity. "Victoria, this is excellent," I said, looking up from the tablet. "Really powerful stuff." She flushed with pleasure. "Do you think so? I've never written anything before, but the journaling function in your app, it helped me organize my thoughts. And once I started, I couldn't stop." "Are you thinking of publishing it?" I asked. She shook her head quickly. "Oh no, it's just for me. Maybe for Olivia and Daniel someday, when they're old enough to understand. I want them to know the whole story, the mistakes I made, the lessons I learned." I handed the tablet back to her. "I think that's a beautiful gift to give them. But you know, your story might help others too. People who've had to reinvent themselves after crisis, or who are struggling with the values they were raised with." Victoria considered this, her head tilted thoughtfully. "Maybe someday," she conceded, "when I've figured more of it out myself." As she spoke, I was struck by how much she had changed in just 7 months. The sister who had once mocked my career choice was now finding value in introspection and personal growth. The woman who had defined herself by her husband's wealth was discovering her own voice. It was a transformation I would never have predicted, born from circumstances neither of us would have chosen. "I had a call from Mom yesterday," Victoria said, changing the subject. "She and Dad want to visit, to meet Daniel." Our parents had kept their distance since the scandal broke, embarrassed by the publicity and unsure how to relate to Victoria without her wealth and status. Their rare phone calls had been awkward, filled with superficial conversation that carefully avoided any mention of James or the dramatic changes in Victoria's life. "How do you feel about that?" I asked carefully. Victoria sighed. "Conflicted. Part of me wants them to see Daniel, to be grandparents to him and Olivia. But another part," she trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "Another part is afraid I'll fall back into old patterns around them, seeking their approval, measuring myself by their standards." I nodded, understanding completely. "That's a valid concern. Would you be there?" she asked. "When they visit? You've always been stronger than me about standing up to them." The irony of this request wasn't lost on me. For years, Victoria had been our parents' favorite, the daughter who fulfilled their expectations. Now she was asking for my protection from the very values she had once embodied. "Of course I'll be there," I promised. "We're in this together now." Victoria smiled gratefully, then yawned. "I should get some sleep before Daniel wakes up for his midnight feeding." She stood, then hesitated. "Becca, do you ever think about how things might have been different if we had been closer as adults, before all this happened?" The question caught me off guard. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but then we might not appreciate what we have now as much." She nodded thoughtfully. "I think you're right. Good night, Becca." "Good night, Vicky." After she left, I remained on the patio, contemplating the strange journey that had brought us to this point. A year ago, I had been the family disappointment, the daughter who had chosen a helping profession over wealth and status. Victoria had been the success story, with her millionaire husband and perfect life. Now those roles were completely reversed. I was financially successful beyond anything our parents had imagined possible, while Victoria was starting over from scratch. But the real change wasn't in our external circumstances, it was in how we related to each other and to ourselves. For the first time since childhood, Victoria and I were truly sisters, supporting each other, learning from each other, building something meaningful together. It wasn't the family I had expected to have, but it was becoming the family I needed. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael Chen, checking in on the latest MindEase user statistics. The app was now helping over 2 million people worldwide, with new features being developed based on user feedback and emerging research. My work as Chief Clinical Officer kept me busy but fulfilled, allowing me to impact mental health care on a scale I had never imagined possible. I texted Michael back with the updates he needed, then set my phone aside and looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city's light pollution. The Ferrari sat unused in the garage. I had offered to sell it and put the money toward Victoria's fresh start, but she had refused, saying it represented something important to me. The truth was, I no longer needed that symbol of success. The real measures of my life's value were all around me, in the sister finding her authentic self, in the niece and nephew who would grow up with different values than we had, and in the millions of people finding help through MindEase. My phone buzzed again, another text, this time from a colleague at Horizon Health about a new research partnership we were developing with several universities. Tomorrow would be busy, with meetings about the partnership, followed by picking Olivia up from preschool, while Victoria attended a college information session. It was a full life, rich with purpose and connection. As I headed inside, I passed the framed photo Victoria had recently placed on the entryway table. The four of us together, Victoria holding baby Daniel, me with Olivia on my hip, all of us smiling at the camera. Not the family either of us had envisioned, but the family we were building together, day by day, out of the ruins of what had come before. 1 year to the day, after Victoria and Olivia had moved in with me, I stood in the entryway of our home, adjusting the collar of my dress and checking my reflection in the mirror. The house hummed with activity, caterers moving efficiently through the kitchen, florists adding final touches to arrangements in the living room, a photographer setting up in the backyard, where tables had been arranged beneath string lights. It was a perfect San Francisco evening, warm with just enough breeze to keep everyone comfortable. "You look beautiful," Victoria said, appearing behind me with 8-month-old Daniel balanced on her hip. He wore a tiny button-up shirt and bow tie that matched the blue of Victoria's simple but elegant dress. "Are you nervous?" I took a deep breath. "A little. It's a big step. The biggest," she agreed with a smile. "But the right one." The past year had transformed both our lives in ways neither of us could have predicted. Victoria had completed her first semester of college with straight A's, discovering a genuine talent for art history that had led to a part-time position cataloging works for a local museum. It was minimal pay, but it gave her tremendous satisfaction. The first job she had ever chosen for love, rather than status or obligation. Meanwhile, MindEase had continued to flourish under Horizon Health's umbrella, expanding to serve over 5 million users worldwide. The personalization engine I had developed was now being studied by researchers as a potential breakthrough in digital mental health intervention, and I had been invited to speak at conferences around the country. The work was deeply fulfilling, allowing me to help people on a scale I had never imagined possible when I was seeing clients one-on-one at the community clinic. But the most profound transformation had been in our relationship as sisters. The competitive dynamic that had defined our interactions since childhood had dissolved, replaced by a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. We had each seen the other, at her most vulnerable and her most resilient. We had learned to appreciate our differences rather than judge them. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. "That'll be Mom and Dad," Victoria said, shifting Daniel to her other hip. "I'll get it." Our parents had visited 3 times in the past year, each visit less awkward than the last. My mother still struggled to understand Victoria's new life, her modest jobs, her return to school, her contentment with a life that included none of the luxury she had once deemed essential. But she was trying, especially after seeing how happy her grandchildren were and how much more authentic Victoria had become. My father had adapted more easily, seeming almost relieved to set aside the constant striving for status that had characterized his relationship with Victoria before. He had taken particular interest in Daniel, spending hours with the baby on his lap, telling him stories and making silly faces that elicited peals of laughter. "Grandma and Grandpa are here," Olivia announced, racing down the hallway in her flower girl dress, her dark curls bouncing. At 5 years old, she had adjusted to our new life with remarkable resilience, thriving in her kindergarten class and blossoming under the shared attention of Victoria and me. The doorbell rang again, and this time I answered it, welcoming Michael Chen and his wife Sophia. More guests began arriving, colleagues from Horizon Health, friends Victoria had made in her art history program, neighbors who had become an essential part of our support system. Amidst the growing crowd, I caught sight of Victoria, speaking intently with our mother near the fireplace. They had been working on rebuilding their relationship, with Victoria setting firm boundaries about criticism and unsolicited advice. It hadn't been easy for either of them, but they were making progress. Tonight, they seemed relaxed together, Victoria showing our mother something on her phone, probably recent photos of the children. "Everyone's here," Michael said, approaching me with a glass of champagne. "Are you ready to get started?" I nodded, accepting the glass, just waiting for one more person. As if on cue, the front door opened again, and David entered. His eyes found mine immediately across the crowded room, and his smile, that same warm, genuine smile that had first drawn me to him, made my heart skip. A psychology professor I had met while speaking at a conference on digital mental health intervention, David had become first a colleague, then a friend, and finally something much more significant. Victoria had been the one to insist I invite him to dinner 6 months ago, noticing how animated I became whenever I mentioned his name. "You've spent a year helping me rebuild my life," she had said. "It's time for you to focus on your own happiness too." Now David moved through the crowd toward me, stopping to greet people he recognized along the way. When he finally reached my side, he slipped his arm around my waist and kissed my cheek. "Sorry I'm late. Faculty meeting ran long." "You're right on time," I assured him, leaning into his solid presence. "We're just about to begin." Michael clinked his glass, and the room gradually quieted. As CEO of Horizon Health, he had insisted on hosting this event to celebrate the 2nd anniversary of MindEase's acquisition and the milestone of reaching 5 million users worldwide. But tonight was about more than professional accomplishments. "Friends and family," Michael began, his voice carrying easily through the room. "We're gathered here to celebrate several remarkable achievements. 2 years ago, Dr. Rebecca Morgan came to my office with an idea. A mental health application that could provide personalized, evidence-based support to people who might otherwise never access psychological care. Today, MindEase has helped 5 million people in 40 countries, setting a new standard for digital mental health intervention. Applause filled the room, and I felt David's arm tighten around my waist in a supportive squeeze. "But tonight," Michael continued, "we're also here to celebrate something equally meaningful, the official launch of the MindEase Foundation, which will provide free access to premium mental health resources for underserved communities worldwide." More applause, louder this time. The foundation had been my dream since the acquisition, a way to ensure that those who needed mental health support the most would never be prevented from accessing it due to financial constraints. The foundation will be funded initially with a $25 million endowment, Michael announced, provided by Dr. Morgan from her personal funds. And I'm pleased to announce that Horizon Health will match that amount, dollar for dollar. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. I hadn't told anyone about the size of my donation, not even Victoria. I glanced at her now and saw tears glistening in her eyes as she mouthed, "I'm so proud of you," across the room. "And now," Michael said, raising his glass, "I'd like to toast not only to professional success, but to personal happiness, to Rebecca and David, who will be married next month in a small ceremony on this very property." All eyes turned to us as guests raised their glasses. David smiled down at me, his eyes reflecting the same certainty I felt. Our engagement had been brief. At 39 and 42, respectively, we had both known exactly what we wanted when we found each other. "To Rebecca and David," the room echoed, glasses clinking. As the formal part of the evening concluded and guests began to mingle again, Victoria made her way to my side, Daniel still perched on her hip. $25 million, she said quietly. "That's half of what you got for Mindies." I nodded. It felt right. Money sitting in an account doesn't help anyone. This way, it can make a real difference. Victoria shook her head in wonder. "You know, when I saw the Ferrari in Mom and Dad's driveway that night, I thought you had finally learned what was valuable. But I had it completely backward. You always knew what mattered. I was the one who had to learn." "We both learned," I corrected gently. "And we're still learning." She shifted Daniel to a more comfortable position. "I have something to tell you. I wasn't going to do it tonight. This is your celebration. But I think you'll be happy for me." What is it?" "I've been offered a full scholarship for the art history program," she said, her eyes shining. "The professor recommended me after I helped with the Impressionist exhibition. It covers tuition and provides a stipend for childcare." "Victoria, that's wonderful!" I hugged her carefully, mindful of Daniel between us. "You've worked so hard for this. I couldn't have done it without you," she said earnestly. "Not just the financial support, but the belief that I could be more than James Phillips's wife or Margaret Morgan's daughter. You saw me, the real me, when I couldn't see myself. That's what sisters do," I reminded her, echoing the words I had said the night James was arrested. "We see each other." As the evening progressed, I found myself drawn into conversations with various guests, discussing the foundation's goals with colleagues, sharing wedding plans with friends, catching up with neighbors about community events. Throughout it all, I was aware of a deep sense of contentment that went beyond the celebration or even my engagement to David. Near midnight, as the last guests were departing, I slipped away to the backyard, needing a moment of quiet to absorb everything. The string lights twinkled overhead, casting a gentle glow over the tables where we had shared dinner. In just a few weeks, this same space would be transformed for our wedding, a small, intimate gathering of those closest to us. "There you are," David said, finding me near the rose arbor. "Everything okay?" I nodded, leaning into his embrace, just taking it all in. 2 years ago, my life was so different. I was working at the clinic, living in that tiny apartment, trying to build Mindies in my spare time. Victoria and I barely spoke, except to snipe at each other during family events. "And now look at you," he said, gesturing toward the house where Victoria could be seen through the window, helping our parents gather their things as they prepared to return to their hotel. Successful entrepreneur, soon-to-be foundation director, beloved sister, adored aunt, and almost wife, I added, turning to face him. "That, too," he agreed with a smile, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Though almost feels like a technicality at this point. You've had my heart since that first conference panel where you challenged everything I thought I knew about digital mental health intervention." I laughed, remembering our spirited debate that had continued over coffee and then dinner. "You held your own pretty well for someone whose theory I was dismantling." "I was too distracted by how brilliant you were to mount a proper defense," he admitted. "Still am, if we're being honest." The sound of laughter drifted from the house. Victoria and my father, their heads bent together over something on his phone. Olivia had fallen asleep on the sofa, her flower girl dress slightly rumpled, while Daniel dozed in the portable crib we had set up in the corner of the living room. "Rebecca," David said, drawing my attention back to him. "I have something for you. I was going to wait until the wedding, but tonight seems right." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "You already gave me a ring," I reminded him, lifting my left hand where his grandmother's emerald sparkled. "This isn't that kind of gift," he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate key on a silver chain. "It's symbolic, really. I sold my house last week. The condo, too." I looked at him in surprise. Though we had agreed he would move in after the wedding, we hadn't discussed selling his properties. "You did? Why?" "Because I wanted to do this fresh," he explained. "Not me moving into your house or you moving into mine. Us building a home together. So I sold both places and—" He hesitated, suddenly looking nervous. "I made an offer on that property we saw in Marin, the one with the view of the bay and enough bedrooms for when Victoria and the kids visit." My breath caught. We had visited the property on a whim during a Sunday drive, both falling in love with its peaceful setting and warmth. But it had seemed like a someday dream, not an immediate possibility. "David, that's a huge decision to make without me," I said, not sure whether to be thrilled or concerned. "I know," he acknowledged, "and if you hate the idea, we can find somewhere else. But I wanted to show you that I'm all in, not just on us as a couple, but on the family you've built. Victoria, Olivia, Daniel, they're part of the package, and I love that about you. How much you value family, how you've created it in unexpected ways." Tears pricked my eyes as he continued. "The key doesn't open anything yet. We don't close for another month, assuming they accept the offer. But it represents a promise that wherever we live, it will be our home. All of us." I took the box from him, touched beyond words by the thoughtfulness behind the gesture. This was what I had never expected to find. A partner who understood that my commitment to Victoria and her children wasn't a burden to be tolerated, but an essential part of who I was. "I love you," I said simply, putting the chain around my neck. "And I love the house in Marin. It's perfect." He pulled me close, and we stood together under the string lights, planning our future in quiet voices. A future that would include not just the two of us, but Victoria finding her path, Olivia growing into her confident personality, and Daniel developing his own. A future built on authenticity rather than appearances, on purpose rather than status. From inside the house, Victoria called my name. "Rebecca, Mom and Dad are leaving." "Coming," I called back, taking David's hand as we walked toward the house. My family was waiting. Not the family I had been born into, with its emphasis on status and appearances, but the family we had become through crisis and growth and genuine care for each other. As we reached the back door, I paused for one last look at the yard where I would soon become David's wife. The Ferrari still sat in the garage, largely unused except for occasional weekend drives along the coast. I had considered selling it many times, but Victoria had convinced me to keep it. "It's more than just a car now," she had said. "It's part of our story." The moment everything changed. She was right, in a way I hadn't fully appreciated until tonight. That night at our parents' house, when I had childishly arrived in flip-flops and revealed the Ferrari in the driveway, had been the beginning of a transformation neither Victoria nor I could have foreseen. Her fall from wealth and status had ultimately freed her to discover her authentic self. My rise to financial success had given me the means to support her journey while expanding my own impact through mind ease. But the true wealth in my life had nothing to do with the Ferrari or the millions in my bank account. It lay in the relationships that had flourished from the ruins of old patterns. My deepened connection with Victoria, my bond with Olivia and Daniel, my partnership with David, and even the slowly healing relationships with my parents. "Everything okay?" David asked, noticing my hesitation. I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Everything is perfect." And it was. Not perfect in the flawless, Instagram-worthy way Victoria had once pursued, but perfect in its messy authenticity. perfect in the way that real life can be, when you're surrounded by people who see and value you for who you truly are. 3 years ago, at Victoria's millionaire wedding, I had been called a poor failure for choosing purpose over wealth, service over status. Tonight, I stood at the threshold of a different kind of success, one measured not in dollars or possessions, but in lives touched and connections forged. As I stepped into the house to join my family, I knew with absolute certainty that I had never been a failure at all. I had simply been waiting for the world to catch up with what I had always known, that true worth comes not from what you have, but from what you give. That real success is not about impressing others, but about making a difference in their lives. And that sometimes the most valuable journeys begin with being underestimated by those who should have believed in you all along. The Ferrari that had once seemed so important as a symbol of my success now represented something entirely different. A bridge between my past and present. A reminder of how far both Victoria and I had come. Not in terms of wealth or status, but in understanding what truly mattered. In finding, at last, the courage to live authentically, to value connection over competition, and to build a family defined not by blood or obligation, but by choice and love. And that, I reflected as I embraced my parents and watched Victoria tuck the blanket more securely around Olivia's sleeping form, was worth more than all the Ferraris in the world.